video, I'm going to share with you a recipe for eggless semolina cake. When there is talk of baking a cake, people usually have doubts and misgivings. This is especially so when baking an eggless cake. Eggless cakes are usually lifeless and sometimes have dense layers in the center. Most people are turned off baking eggless cakes. However, this is not so the case when baking this eggless semolina cake. Yes, it's better to use a weighing machine for ingredients rather than a measuring tub to get uniform taste and quality. But for this recipe, you don't need either measuring cups or weighing scales. We can use just any cup that we have at home to measure. This semolina cake recipe is very forgiving. It never fails. In this video, I made 2 sets of semolina cake. The first cake I baked in a Pyrex dish and followed the recipe. My second cake was baked in a metal pan and I made a minor change to the recipe. On the ingredients B list, I switched the quarter cup all-purpose flour to 1/3 cup. The first thing to do is to prepare the cake pan. Apply some butter or oil to the mold, then sprinkle some flour and set aside. My second cake pan was prepared in exactly the same way. First, buttered the pan, then sprinkled lightly with flour. The next step is to combine all ingredient A in the recipe and let it soak for an hour. This step is to make the cake soft and moist. I'm using here evaporated milk. This is half cup. And this another quarter cup of milk. Add half cup of thick curd to the milk. Next, 1 cup of powdered sugar is added. To make this powdered sugar, I used an ordinary blender to powder the regular granulated sugar. A half teaspoon of vanilla powder or 1 teaspoon of vanilla essence. And a half teaspoon of salt. I'm using here pink Himalayan rock salt. 1 1/4 cup semolina flour. It would be best if the semolina flour is lightly roasted. That's 1 cup. And here another 1/4 cup of semolina flour. Combine all the ingredients. Mix until the sugar has melted completely. Now, for the final ingredient to this mixture of ingredients A, 1/3 cup melted butter. Combine all ingredients until a smooth batter is formed. Cover and set aside ingredients A. Leave the ingredients A to soak for at least an hour. I also measured out another set of ingredients A for the second cake I planned to make. Added semolina flour and gave a good mix. Then added the melted butter. Gave a good mix, then allowed the mixture to soak for 1 hour. While the 2 sets of ingredients A is soaking for 1 hour, we can get ready ingredients B and C. Ingredients B is dry ingredients which have to be sieved together. A 1/4 cup plain flour. 1 teaspoon baking powder. Half teaspoon baking soda. Sieve twice to ensure the baking powder and baking soda is mixed into the flour uniformly. For the second cake I made 1 change in the ingredients B. That is, I used 1/3 cup all-purpose flour instead of a 1/4 cup. The rest of the ingredients I kept it the same. I wanted to see the difference it would make. All the ingredients B was then sieved together for the second cake. Ingredient C is optional, but I like the cake to have some fruits and nuts. I measured out 2 portions of the ingredient C, as here I was making 2 cakes. For each cake, I measured out a 1/4 cup raisins and 1/3 cup walnuts. Instead of raisins, we can also add tutti frutti, which will make the cake more colorful. The nuts I'm using for this cake is walnuts. They go well for this cake as they are soft and crunchy. The walnuts were chopped coarsely before adding to the cake mixture. Now, to combine all ingredients to make the cake mixture, I have set the oven to preheat at 180 degrees. The chopped nuts are first added, followed with the raisins. A spoonful of flour is first added to the fruit and nut and given a good mix before combining with the ingredients A mixture. This is to ensure the fruits and nut do not sink to the bottom of the cake. The rest of the ingredients B is added and combined with ingredient A and C. Finally, 2 tablespoons of milk was added to the cake mixture as it was not at the right consistency. The final cake mixture should be light and should have a dropping consistency. The cake mix is then poured into the prepared mold. The surface of the cake mix is smoothed out. For the second cake I made, everything was done exactly the same as the first cake. The only difference was that for the second cake, I increased the quantity of the all-purpose flour from a 1/4 cup to 1/3 cup, adding also the 2 tablespoons of evaporated milk as for the first cake. For the second cake, I also baked it in a metal cake pan. The 2 cakes were then baked in a preheated oven at 180 degrees and for 40 minutes. Baked in the middle rack. Timing the baking of the cake depends upon the oven. So always insert a toothpick into the cake and bake until it comes out clean. My 2 cakes baked beautifully within 40 minutes. My first cake was baked in a Pyrex dish, while I used a cake tin for my second cake. The first cake was more browned than the second cake even when all the oven settings were the same. Maybe that was because of the different cake pans I was using. My second cake, which had just a little more flour in it, turned out better as it was more fluffy and moist. Taste-wise, both cakes tasted superb. Semolina gives the cake a grainy texture and a nice bite. Unlike typical eggless cakes, which are mostly dense, this cake turned out fluffy and moist. Yes, the semolina cake with fruits and nuts in it had a great flavor and bite to it. I can easily say this cake demands celebration. Try making this cake for your next celebration. That's all, my friends. Thanks for watching.